All right, and welcome back now to Module 6 of the Miller System with myself, Stephen Summers, and of course, Mr. Jim Miller, who'll be here in just a moment. So just get us back up to date now to see where we are and where did we actually come from in the program so far. So we're in the third phase now of the conversion call, and we have covered a lot of ground since we started this program. We've gone from talking about our own limiting beliefs, talking about our clients' limiting beliefs, talking about language, right through then to, of course, the whole conversion call process. We gave you an entire breakdown of that. Then we went into state, inducing state in yourself before the call, inducing state in the client on the call, which was a very critical thing to understand. And by now, you actually should be doing that with your clients at this point. And then, of course, we started to jump into each of the phases of the conversion call in more detail and giving you a real step-by-step approach that you can and are, I'm sure, implementing at the moment with your prospects. And so now we're in the third phase of this call where we're going to define the program. So we've gone from creating our authority positioning, capturing time, through to then the cognitive dissonance phase, which, as I mentioned in the previous module, is really where this whole game is at. When you do that effectively, your results will absolutely skyrocket. And so now we're into defining the program. We've got them into state. We've shown them the fantasy. We've brought them back down to the despair state. We've got a commitment to conclude. They're not prepared to live like this any longer. And now we're defining the program. We're going to reveal the investment, and then we're going to reveal how it is they will pay for what we've agreed with them. So with that said, I'm going to bring Jim back now, and he's going to bring us through first defining the program, then investment revealing, and then payment revealing. So Jim, let's go.
Very good to be with you tonight, Stephen, and those who are listening. Again, continuing with the conversation of cognitive dissonance. Again, probably one of the most exciting bodies of study in the whole consideration of influence. Some of the greatest minds in the world in psychology and influence and negotiation all have tipped their hat to this body of work of Festinger that he started many, many decades ago. But what I'd like to do now is continue with this consideration and the actual flow of the process itself. As you said, we just recently in the previous module discussed the entire cognitive dissonance methodology, where we're basically having our client or our prospect identify that which would be included in a fantasy state and then move them into that which we consider to be the despair state. And between those two is the desire to attain or achieve or to be identified with, and then, of course, the perceived limitations or obstacles or experiences, the lack of resources, etc. That friction, that chasm, as we say, between the two is where cognitive dissonance exists. And the truth is that we as human beings, we always are seeking a place of equilibrium, a place where we're at peace with ourselves internally, consciously, subconsciously. Many of us, if not most of us, live in this place of what we desire to be and where we actually are. Our actions are in dissonance with our thoughts and our beliefs and our desires, and that tension is something that even mentally in our dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, it identifies and it must act upon it. It must act upon it. And so it manifests itself, if it's not acted upon, in areas of stress and tension, disappointment, dissatisfaction, etc. So what we're looking to do really is a noble task to facilitate individuals in crossing that chasm and finding resonance where there now exists dissonance. So we've spoken about that methodology, and now what we're ready to do is where we've got consensus from our prospect or our client that in fact a program and an individual like yourself, of course, that would be able to facilitate them in this process to actually start realizing that which they desire, to start assuaging, if you would, the limitations that we perceive to be in the way through our product or through our coaching or our consultative sessions. We've got them convinced that we are, in fact, the answer. And so they've agreed that they are a candidate for that type of work. And now what we're ready to do is we're ready to bring them into the conversion, into the further conversion, where now we're taking them from a prospect into a client. And we're now ready to reveal the program, reveal the time commitment, reveal the economics, and then, of course, in the last phase of things, to deal with and to coach them through the resistance they'll put up, in many cases, what some people call objections, but we'll certainly dispel that entire concept, because that's a concept that is actually an illusion. It's a misnomer. There are no objections. And we'll talk about that in the next module. So, one thing that I do want to remind us is that there's been a lot of research in persuasive communication, and that's what cognitive dissonance is. It's one of many persuasive communications. And there's a term that's called minimal justification. And what minimal justification is, it's a theory that predicts that counter-attitudinal action, meaning that when we take action that is counter to our attitude, right? And especially if it's done so without force or without necessary over-justification, then in fact it actually leads to a change in attitude. You know, there are many people that say that, you know, your emotions will determine your actions, and that's true if you believe that. But I'm on the other side of that formula, and I believe that your actions will determine your emotions. And those are the emotions that I choose to live in, the emotions that are generated from taking action in the face of or despite a resistance or a reluctance or a limiting belief, etc. So it's those actions that we take, these counter-attitudinal actions, that will enable us to actually change our attitude and to start realizing this resonance, yes? So there's two types of justifications. One is an external justification, where a person's reason or explanation for their behavior is brought upon by an external situation. It's not necessarily of their own volition, right? And then there's an internal justification, where there's a reduction of dissonance by changing something about oneself, that being their attitude and their behavior. And this is really what we're looking to do. We're looking to find this internal justification that individuals can find in order to start realizing that which they desire. Now, in order for them to do that, of course, they've got to get into the course, right? And of course, many of us will feel that, okay, this is where the selling starts. This is where I start talking about pricing, and I start trying to close the deal, and I'm faced with objections. And the truth is that web that we get caught in, where all of a sudden our identity changes, where we're no longer congruent with who we are, or certainly who we desire to be, where we start saying and feeling things that just really we'd rather not say and feel and be, right? We just don't want to be a salesman. We don't want to put that checkered jacket on and start talking sales. Well, the beauty about all this is, my friends, is you'll never have to sell again. In 28 years, I've never sold anything, but I've assisted, I've facilitated conversion with individuals that certainly have a desire. They certainly have the means, meaning that there is an availability of money or an availability to money, to resources, right? An availability of resources meaning that it's there now. An availability to resources means that they, even though it may not be there, they have the opportunity or the capacity to identify financial resources in order to join in and to purchase from you your services or your products. So here's where we're now going to move into basically the entire coaching process of conversion, the continued conversion, to bring them into enrollment. So as we said, one of the things we want to do, again, is to get commitment, consensus that they are, in fact, an ideal candidate for our program. And I've got to tell you, once you have completed the cognitive dissonance methodology successfully, and as you get better, as you start learning the nuances, the idiosyncratic steps that are involved, and you learn through experience or through continued education or coaching, then you'll find that there's not a single person on the other end of that question that's going to say no. They're never going to tell you, no, I don't feel that I'm qualified or that I'm an ideal client for a program that would address the dissonance that obviously exists in my life. No, they're not going to say no. They're going to say, yes, of course I do. So we've got that consensus. Now, so what is the next thing that we say? What is the next thing that we say right there? So I say, Stephen, look, after speaking over this period of time, I'm sure it's probably very easy for you to conclude, just as it is for me to conclude, that you would be an ideal candidate for a program that would facilitate you in achieving what it is you desire and overcoming or eliminating that which you perceive is keeping you from that place in your life. Would you agree? And Stephen says, yes. We don't reward him by saying great. We don't reward him by saying wonderful. We don't reward at all. We never reward as a coach or a consultant. Now, we acknowledge, so we might say, fine. And then what is the next thing we say at this point? The next thing we want to do is now we want to start shaping the conversion, the completion of the conversion, which is basically the reveal of, as I mentioned earlier, the program itself, the economics involved, and then the enrollment process, and then, of course, dealing with any type of resistance in the end. So the next thing that I want to do is use a process called minimize and generalize. Minimize and generalize. Because what we want to do now is we want to do that which is natural to a coach, and that is basically a coach is not concerned with pricing. A coach is not concerned with affordability. A true coach or a true consultant, as you start evolving into that person, or if you already have evolved, as Robert Keegan, an intellect that I like to quote constantly, as we move from a socialized mind complexity into a self-authoring mind complexity, right? We maintain the alpha positioning. We maintain and never have to defend. We never have to defend the value that we've associated with our program as it relates to money, right? That's not a defendable type of position that we involve ourselves in. We've determined what our value is. We've placed that valuation on it, and it's not up to us to defend it. It's up to the prospect to find affordability. It's up to the prospect to identify means. Now, of course, we can help them. We can facilitate that by coaching them through that whole process. And again, we'll deal with that on Module 6. But let's get back to the next step, the next thing we say, which is to minimalize and generalize. So Stephen says, yes, I do believe, I can see how I would be an ideal candidate for that as well. And I say, fine. I say, Stephen, it's really very simple, the program itself, and many, if not all of my clients, like yourself, have found it actually very attractive, and also they can see the value in it. And so let me share with you the three major components of the program itself, if you would allow me. Now let's stop right there. So what we did is we minimalized, right? Stephen, it's really very simple. You see, that's a frame. That's a frame. That's to bring a person, remember, they just went through a very complex dialectic with you, right? Where they may have spilled their guts out. On many occasions, I've had people in tears at this point just because of, taking this really intimate look at their own life, probably in many cases for the first time. But anyway, so what we want to do now is we want to frame them. We need to kind of throw a little water in their face, freshen them up, and get them ready for the next phase, because the next phase is basically, for the most part, a calculative phase as opposed to a deliberative stage. You see, we were deliberating We were deliberating in the earlier process, and now we're going to move into a calculative phase where we're going to basically request of them to calculate their availability to funding and their availability to timeliness, meaning doing things now on the call with us. So we throw that little water in their face by framing. Stephen, it's really very simple. And all of my clients, just like you, see where we start? We start this associative type of identification, right? We start creating and framing their identity as one of an already group of existing clients that are like themselves. So, Stephen, it's really very simple, and most, if not all of my clients, just like yourself, who expressed the same type of circumstances as you have found it very compelling, and now I'm using social proof, have found it very compelling to involve themselves in the course, and I'm certain, I'm giving certainty, I'm certain that should we go forward, right, not when we go forward, but should we go forward, I'm basically doing a little push away, should we go forward, I'm certain that you would come to the same conclusion. Now, what I'd like to do is describe to you 3 important but very basic tenets of my program, if you would allow me. You see, now what we're doing right now is we have made this very simple, right? By giving the person 3 components of the program. People, please understand me at this point. Do not start selling your program. Do not start going into an explanation of the entire process. And you're going to want to, just as I have. You can tell that I'm obviously very verbose, right? So you can imagine when I want to explain my programs, but I have to reel myself in, because the truth is that they're ready. They're ready now. There's no selling required. What is now necessary is basically a reveal of the 3 major components of your program, and you can say 1 or 2 sentences about each. That's it. And believe me, you say 1 or 2 sentences about each, let's say 2, 3 at the most, you would have said a lot. You would have said enough for them in that moment. And if they want more, guess what they'll do? You got it. They'll ask questions. And when they ask questions, do not tell them that's a great question. Please, again, do not reward. Again, the response, they ask a question. Well, Jim, can you tell me a little bit more or go into a little bit or clarify a little bit about that whole process of cognitive dissonance? And so what I'll say is, certainly. That's it. Certainly. And then I'll give, again, 2 sentences, and that's it. Keep it concise. Remember, this is all about alacrity and what else? Specificity. You got it. Alacrity and specificity. So we'll tell them the 3 components of our program. Number 1, the program is this. Number 2, the program is this. And the program is number 3, this. So generally what you can do is you can say, what does the program look to achieve, right? Start at the end first. What the program looks to achieve is your ability as a client to finally be able to achieve those things you desire, but have never been able to do so on your own because of perceived obstacles or beliefs or experiences. Number 2, how do we achieve this? One of the ways that we do this, and working with my clients, is to basically to teach them and to transmit to them the strategies and the complexities of a highly persuasive communication system that is called cognitive dissonance. That's how we do it. And number 3, what are some of the successes that I've had with it? And so many of my clients have found that immediately they've been able to transform their conversations from one of sales to one of conversion. And let me tell you, the most common comment that I get is how natural it feels. So that's it. That's 3 components. And those 3 components will sell. So start with the end. What are the results? Number 2, what is the methodology? And number 3, give some social proof and some assurance, right? Like T. Harv Eker used to say, make the big fat claim. The big fat claim, right? This is one of the secrets of marketing. Because what you're doing right is you're marketing. You're not selling, but you're certainly marketing your program at this moment. So it's really very simple, Stephen. And many of my clients, just like yourself, have found that the program itself has been very effective in bringing them immediate results. And I'll be happy to share with you the three major components of the program, if you allow me. And by the way, why do we say, if you allow me? This is really interesting, and I won't go to it in this conversation, but there's a school of psychology that's basically called resistance-free selling, and there's a strategy in there that's called foot in the door. Foot in the door. And what the foot in the door is basically it's getting people to make small commitments and then ultimately ascend into larger commitments. And one of the ways that we get people to make a small commitment is to offer them something with permission. If they freely offer us their permission to proceed, no, it's not permission selling, but there's a psychology based upon it. The principle involved is that a small agreement creates a bond between the requester and the requestee. The other person has to justify their agreement to themselves. You can't use the first request as something really significant, so you use something that is small, and you get them to now stay consistent to their previous actions, you see. If you ask them permission, you're creating a bond. And if they allow you the permission, now you've gotten them through that allowance to make a small commitment. And remember, they're going to want to remain consistent in their commitments. So we're creating the momentum towards the ultimate choice that they'll have, which is basically to put down money in your program and become a client, right? It's really a very natural process. So, Stephen, if you'll allow me, I'll be happy to describe to you the three major components. And so I described the three major components to Stephen. And I don't ask if there's any questions, because that sounds more like a press conference. You know, are there any questions? If there's a question, he would ask me a question. The only reason we ask if there's any questions is because we don't know what to say next, right? We never know what to say next. And we're undisciplined. We're undisciplined in our speech. We're undisciplined in our communication because we really don't know what to focus on. And because we don't know, we do things that are actually counterproductive, right? We actually stop the person. We stop the momentum. We get out of role real easy. We get out of role. As a consultant, as a coach, you don't ask if there's any questions because you assume everyone understood what you said. If there's any questions, they will ask. If there's need for clarification, they will ask. If not now, certainly at some point towards the end. Okay? You got that? Good. Now, Stephen, we're ready to move now and do the revealing of the price, if you're ready.
Absolutely, Jim. I believe that would be great. And again, this is a slightly shorter module, as I'm sure you're seeing here. However, it's a critical module, and really this is a transitory phase in the process. And the ideal situation here is that we don't go into the next module necessarily with the client. And there have been many occasions that I have conducted calls into deals anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 plus on a single call, and I haven't had any resistance at all. So resistance is the next module, which is, of course, what a lot of you will want to learn about and will be very, very interested in. However, this process is so good. There have been many times, as I mentioned, I just haven't had to even get into that. So, Jim, just briefly on that, is that something that we must expect resistance, but we may or may not get it at this point? Would that be about right?
We may or may not get it, and what I tell when I coach, when I transfer this body of knowledge is that what we do is we don't expect resistance, but we embrace resistance, right? Because to expect it means that we basically are deficient in what we might have done, so we expect that people are going to resist. It's not so much that I'm looking to expect resistance as I am to embrace it, because truly people, when called to make choice in the face of uncertainty, most people are very leery to do so, only because so many critical filters start arising, such as, gosh, can I afford this? What am I going to have to sacrifice in order to pay for this program? Can I trust that the results will actually appear? Can I trust that I'll actually be disciplined enough to listen to the modules, right? All these types of critical filters come up. And you know what? They're human. They're all part of the human experience. And as a coach, our obligation is to be empathetic, to be compassionate with. Compassionate from the Greek, com meaning with. Passion, passeo, means suffering. To be able to get with the client and suffer with the client in this moment of doubt and uncertainty, where all of the little demons and the voices and the bugaboos come up in their mind, right? This is when a coach is needed most. This is when the shaman would come in, and, you know, in ancient civilizations, in moments of uncertainty, when a man reaches boyhood, or when a girl reaches womanhood, or when you're getting ready to enter into marriage or enter into death. The shaman would come and give explanation, but more importantly, give interpretation. But he would be there with you in this empathetic, this compassionate positioning. So when people actually do have this uncertainty, you must look upon them with compassion, right? Because we do the same, don't we? I mean, imagine if someone on the very first call were to ask you to invest $10,000 in their program. Wouldn't there be some resistance in some occasions? Yeah, in some occasions, maybe not. Trust me, this though. The more effective one becomes in the process of cognitive dissonance, the less likely that there is to be resistance. And of course, Stephen, we've been working together for a bit now, so you've pretty much reached that point of mastery so that people feel you've been able to dispel the critical filters, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that took time. And actually coming with that point, I think an interesting thing to just mention here is when we're revealing an investment, it's important to do some price conditioning. Can you just talk about that for a second, Jim?
Well, here's the thing. Price conditioning means that, it's not so much a manipulative type of a strategy or tactic when done by a coach or a consultant. Because price condition is basically preparing the individual to understand the valuation of your program, to be able to associate a certain value point with programs such as your own that they may have experience with, or they may have read about, or maybe they know nothing at all. So what I will do, let's go right into this right now. And by the way, I can certainly assure you of one thing, Stephen, and that's this. As I'm doing this module, I'm drinking a glass of some extraordinary red Cabernet that was given to me by a friend who went to the wineries in California. And this is one of the better Cabernets. It runs into the hundreds of dollars per bottle, right? And I can assure you of this, that expensive wine tastes better than cheap wine. And I'd like to declare that. So anyway, with that said, that segues into the next reveal, which are the economics, right? So Stephen, we've already discussed the three major components of the program. And now what I basically say, and of course, Stephen, there's always economics that are associated with a program. See, I never say price, I never say dollars, I never say money, I just say economics, right? Because economics basically kind of, frames it. It frames it. Of course, there's economics. Everybody understands economics. I mean, we live in a capitalistic society, at least, most of us. So yes, there are economics involved. This is the jargon of a coach. A salesman would say, well, the price is, or the investment, or the fee, right? We're not getting into that type of linguistics. We're talking as a coach or a consultant from an alpha position. So, of course, Stephen, you see how I say, of course? I'm speaking to the subconscious of the prospect at this point. I'm doing a linking, a neurolinguistic, an NLP procedure to basically link what it is I'm about to say to the agreement of the subconscious, and therefore it somewhat flows into the conscious mind. So, of course, Stephen, there are economics that are involved in the program, as there are with many. I mean, I've been involved in programs for well over 25 years. I've been involved in programs sometimes sometimes multiple programs at a time, as I am right now. I'm involved in one program that's a $25,000 mastermind, another program that's a 8-module program that with a valuation of $10,000, and then a smaller one at $1,500. So there's always economics associated with coaching programs and products. Okay, step out the conversation. You see, what I did basically right there is let them know 2 things, right? What are the 2 things? Number one, that it's good to be in coaching programs, right? I've been in coaching programs for over 15 years and sometimes multiple coaching programs, and I'm even in coaching programs now as we speak. So I'm all about coaching programs. So I'm giving my endorsement to coaching programs as if it is a natural thing, as if it is expected of someone who desires to be successful at some point being in a coaching program. I mean, think of any professional athlete, any professional dancer, any professional singer, any professional lawyer who was not taught and coached into their profession. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We're not isolated. The knowledge that we have, the wisdom that we have, the experience that we have, right? It must come, it must be from not only ourselves, but from others that are wiser, more experienced, more broadly educated, whatever the case may be. It's the normal and natural disposition of anyone who desires to be successful to continuously educate themselves, to continuously read, to continuously experience events and programs, and ideally to be with a coach that will, or a consultant that will lead you into a greater mental complexity or an ability to do your task more effectively, right? And so this is what we're doing. So this is the first thing that we're revealing. We're revealing the natural dynamic of being involved with a coach. Secondly, what we're doing is we're price conditioning from the floor to the ceiling. You notice what I did is I put 3 different price points, a $25,000, a $10,000, and a $1,500, right? So we're setting the floor at $1,500, we're setting the ceiling at $25,000, and we're setting the median, whatever the word is, at $10,000, right? So what we're basically saying is that this is, for the most part, what coaching products that are worth their salt are priced at, depending upon the product itself. And if you notice, I gave a brief description. The $25,000 coaching program was what? A mastermind. The $10,000 coaching program was what? Sessioned, right? Over 8 sessions. And then the $1,500 program, I really didn't say much about because I don't want to say much about that. Because I don't want to lead my client. Now, of course, if your program is $1,500, then when you'll set a floor at $300, right? So you must set that floor at $300. You can set the median or mean at $2,500, so to say, and you can set the ceiling at $10,000 to $15,000, right? So I've done that. So I've done the price conditioning, and now what I'm doing is I'm ready to reveal what? The price? No. The fee? No. The cost? No. The economics involved that are attached to the program. If you will allow me, again, asking, so that it is they who commit to, who bond with myself by allowing permission, right? There is a request and there is acquiescence, or there is permission that's provided, right? So it's somewhat of a bond. It's a human bond that it's primal. It's a primal human bond, right? It's done out of courtesy, it's done out of respect, and it's done out of basically compliance to the human code of ethics, of etiquette even, if you will. So we've done the price conditioning, and now we're ready to reveal the economics. Now, how are we going to reveal the economics? After we've told them the 3 different coaching programs that we've been involved in and the various valuations of each, now what we're ready to do is reveal ours. So how do we start? Again, minimalize and generalize. And so, get back into the conversation. So, Stephen, it's actually very simple. The economics that are attached to the program, and clients have come into the program in many different ways, and what I've done is to create three separate ways that hopefully will facilitate someone like yourself coming into the program. Should we both decide? Should we both decide? I'm not giving away my power. I'm not relinquishing authority at this moment by letting them be the sole deciders. It's should we both decide that this would, in fact, be a relevant program in your life at this time, right? Would you allow me to share with you those means that I've created for clients like yourself? Yes, they would. Now, what have I not given them, by the way, right now? I haven't given them the price. I skipped it. I skipped it and went right into the methodology of payment, right? Because, again, I want to be the absolute last thing that I say, right? Because the minute I give the price, that's where their focus is going to be. That's where they're going to go internal. That's where they're going to start dealing with their own critical filters and trying to find resolution to come to a decision. And also, too, it's where all of their energy is going to be, that inward focus, right? So what I do is I skip over it and I go into the three different opportunities of coming in. So what I've done, Stephen, is very simple. And many clients have found that it actually facilitates them in the moment on the call with me. And this is where I introduce now the urgency, the immediacy. Introduce now the urgency, the immediacy with me. And so the first one is really simple. Again, minimalize. The majority of my clients find this to be the easiest way or the most attractive way for themselves. Maybe you too will also feel the same way, and that is basically, a payment in full, right? Which we're all conditioned to expect a reward for paying in full, right? And so I play the game. So a payment in full, basically what we do is instead of 100% of the fee, we only collect 90% of the fee involved. And a second way is have that availability. You may not have that availability. You may not have in this moment that availability yourself. See, again, I'm putting them in the moment as a client, right? And in this moment, you may not have the availability yourself. So what I've done is I've basically broken it down into three equal payments, beginning with the first one beginning now with me, and then the second and the third being over a short duration of time. And if that's a second way. And the third way, of course, is basically up to consideration, up to discussion for those who may need a little bit more of a consideration. But of course, time equals money, so there is cost to that would bring it in addition to the value of the program itself. So of those three, so you see what we did. On one end of the spectrum is reward. On the other end of the spectrum is punishment. You get rewarded if you pay in full. You get punished if you have to come up with something creative. So what are we looking to drive them to? We're looking then to really drive them to the middle, into the payment programs that are already set, or even at a payment in full, But most people I have found have been driven to the middle, right? And so, Stephen, of those three, with the course itself having a valuation of $9,800 associated with it. So how it breaks down is a 10% reduction in price, not discount, a 10% reduction in price at the $9,800, a 10% reduction in price at the $9,800. Economics are 81, 79, I don't know. And then the second one being where we would take the 9,800, break it up into three, and then of course the third one where we take 9,800 and on top of it we put a $500 cost for administration and time. So of those three, with the program itself, which one would you feel is best for you to enroll with me now for your course? And that's it. That's it. And one or two things are going to happen, right? They're either going to enroll or they're not. They're going to enroll or they're going to resist. They're going to enroll or they're going to resist. And when they enroll, you simply say, fine, that's it. not great, not I'm very excited, not congratulations, none of this stuff. Do not all of a sudden become a cheerleader. What is this? Congruency. Congruency in this. Congruency. Congruency in the role. Congruency in the persona of the alpha coach, the alpha consultant who really doesn't need your money, really doesn't need you as a client, but is inviting you, is opening the door for you to come in, inviting you, is inviting you, is the characteristics of the program itself, and then the different payment plans that are available. And then what I have not done, by the way, is if you notice, I have not spoken about time. I have not spoken about time because I leave that open as a closing question. So it'll come up in their mind, but I leave it to come up in their mind. Now, if it doesn't come up in their mind, of course, I'll say it for them before the phone call ends, should they enroll. Now, so, it's kind of like, oh, by the way, the course starts this Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Of course, it's going to be recorded for those who aren't able to make it live, or your session will begin Tuesday at 8 o'clock. If there's a better time that works for you, I'll be happy to consider it and see if it fits in my schedule as well. Right? And so there we are. Now we're at the point of either enrollment or resistance, Stephen.
Exactly. And as I mentioned earlier on, you may or may not receive any resistance. And actually, I think something that's very important to talk about here is whether the person you're speaking to is a previous client from a lower price program or somebody who is coming in from a first call and they've possibly gone through a case study that you would have created or something like that in your funnel. And then they're getting on a call after booking in, after watching the case study and feeling it makes sense to have a discussion with you. So depending on where they are in the client relationship and in the customer life cycle, you're going to receive differing levels of response. And so I talk about that within the marketing portion of this program. That's just something to bear in mind. In my opinion, if the person has been around your circle of influence for a period of time, they've been through some of your programs before, even just one of your programs before, let's say you have a premium, a mid-tier product, say $1,000 or so, you're going to find this process is a lot more simple at this point because of the fact that they're already qualified in that they had invested with you before. And of course, you would have brought them through the filtering process that I describe in my module. And so really, that's a determinant, and you can kind of understand before you get on a call by looking at their answers to the questions that you've asked them, where they are in their own minds. And so you can not necessarily, as Jim said earlier on, you don't expect the resistance, but you embrace it should it come at this point. And that's just something to know going into the conversation. So Jim, I think we've covered a lot in this module. I think that I expect it to be a shorter module, funnily enough, as I mentioned to you earlier on. But, I think you covered it fantastically well. There's a nice process that you can swipe from what Jim has utilized in this module and bring it into your own conversations. And when you do that, you're going to have big success. But again, it's really important just to mention that in that cognitive dissonance phase, the stronger you've induced state within the client and they've gone to the fantasy and then they've gone to the despair, as long as you've done that very well, this part of the process can almost be like a formality. I mean, I have done calls that have taken me literally 2 minutes to do this part of the process, which, could have taken longer, but did not take longer because essentially there may be times, and this is my final question to you, Jim, but I've certainly experienced it, but there may be times when the person says, where do I check out for this? Even without necessarily you spending too much time on this, they might just say, well, where's my link to invest, or how do I send you money? Have you ever had that before, Jim? Because I certainly have.
I have. I know it's very difficult to believe, and there's a lot of critical filters now that are being stimulated, right, in the minds of many because we're so beat up by the sales process. We're so absolutely devastated by the sales process because it chews you up and spits you out. Remember, again, go to your bookshelf and throw out every single sales book that you have. Why? Because selling is destructive. It's a destructuring of the actual conversion process. What we're looking for is structure. We're looking to build a structure. Remember the scaffolding technique. Remember the edifice, which is the client. Remember what it is we're looking to do is create the dynamic and to bring resolution within that dynamic. This is all structured. It all makes sense. The mind embraces it. The mind loves organization. And so because it's structured, what is the most important structural thread that's woven through this whole thing is your identity, your consistency and congruency within the role of being a coach or a consultant, and never slipping out, never giving that, hey, great, or never stepping out and giving your exuberance or your approval or over-explaining yourself or feeling as though you have to defend or, in fact, defending. As long as we're remaining consistent and congruent. Does it take a little time? Yes, it does. But I got to tell you, I have a client that emailed me today. Actually, he messaged me today. We haven't even begun his course yet, but I did happen to talk a little bit about the reveal process as we discussed tonight. And so he went and actually used it on one of his prospects. When I say used it, because he's really not even trained in this yet, so he basically just took it as a tactic and employed it. Very easily closed a $985 deal on one of his lower-end programs. So what I'm saying is this, is that the strategies and the techniques are effective. Why are they effective? And I always say, provide evidence before explanation. In other words, prove it to me before I listen to your explanation. And so the evidence is this, my friends. This process, this technique, this school of thought, this discipline of cognitive dissonance, again, has been approached, has been considered, has been published upon, has been studied, has been researched by some of the greatest minds in influence, negotiation, psychology. All you have to do is go to Google and find out how deep and does, for the most part, is a reveal of the human experience, the human psyche, the dissonance that we have, and that which we desire to be, and that which we actually act into being, right? The intentions that we go to our grave with that we never have fulfilled. This is the big regret, what I call the big regret. So what we're here to do in life is to basically be in opposition to that dynamic, the big regret, and to facilitate people, to facilitate youth, to facilitate the elderly, to facilitate the impoverished, to facilitate anybody who it is that comes to us, whether it be, with an economic exchange or whether it be in contribution, but to facilitate that individual into being and achieving that which they desire, because the desire comes from something in the world. We can create is the pathway of fulfillment and create the desires in ourselves. But what we can create is the pathway of fulfillment and achievement if we know how. If someone can lead us through that process, because what is it that ends up happening? The typical human experience. And that is discouragement, delay, despair, depression, whatever you want to call it. All of the obstacles that get in the way, that kill our spirit, our desire. And we go to war with that dynamic. We pick up a sword as a coach, as a consultant. We pick up a shield and we get into battle. And that's who we are. We're warriors. Right? Soldiers against this dynamic which kills the human spirit. At least that's my take on it, Stephen.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, Jim. Well, look, with that said, I think we're going to close out this module. There's a lot of there's so many things in here, even simple things like using the word economics. That, as crazy as that might sound to you now, listening to this, that one shift, that one small change in your language absolutely will have a huge impact on your own ability to influence because of the power of that word. And I've utilized that word myself whenever speaking to clients. And I just felt like that little changes like this really can make a big difference. And of course, the entire strategy that we have given you, when you put that in with things like that, you're just going to see incredible results. So I have really enjoyed this module. In with things like that, you're just going to see incredible. I look forward to jumping into the resistance module next with you, Jim. And then at that point, we will be at the end of the conversion call process. You'll have everything that you need to go out and get your company from 5 to 6 figures, 6 to 7 figures, and beyond. And so looking forward to giving that to you. And of course, you'll get to dive into my marketing material as well. That will show you the qualification process. And really at that point, you have everything you need to go out there and just make big things happen in your business.